Okay, good afternoon to those that are seeing us live now. We're just going to hold on for a minute as people get notice that we're live. In the meantime, I hope everyone had a great day. It's kind of gray in the morning, but it kind of got, well, at least it cleared up. I'm trying to make sure that we're live. We had a bunch of complaints in the past where we would start and then people would miss the first part of the conversation or what have you because we were talking too quickly. So I'm trying to make sure that doesn't happen and wait till some people sign on. But today, primarily, we'll talk about the Parkside decision, which we got last week. It is a surprising decision to me. I'm not surprised that the decision was made, but the logic for it is surprising. Doesn't really make any sense. But to those that are joining us, good afternoon. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. It is 4:03 on October the 12th. It's a holiday, so we were kind of not sure if we would come live today, but a lot of people were texting us about the Parkside decision and the op-ed that I wrote last week, and so we want to talk about that a little bit today. In terms of other news, I know we keep talking about the stimulus package. I don't know. I don't have words for whatever the Senate Republicans are doing. It seems like they don't want to pass anything, and it's going to get worse. Without having a vaccine, there are a lot of people struggling, and they're running out of the money that they made. The extra $600 is running out, and we're already seeing signs of that. So, for the life of me, I do not understand either from an ideological standpoint or from a political standpoint what the Republicans in the Senate are doing. It doesn't make any sense. And right now, the Pelosi's at 2.2 or 2.3. Trump is saying 1.6 or 1.7, but I don't think that matters because the Senate Republicans seem to be not wanting to vote for anything. And here's the problem. If you're relying on that money, if you're a small business looking for a PPP extension, if you are waiting for this extra money, if you're a state or town needing some extra support, even if Biden wins, he's not in office till the end of January. So there may be a significant stimulus package signed at the end of January if there's no significant movement on a vaccine. But that may be too late for a lot of places. That may be too late for a lot of small businesses. And as much as the stock market's doing great, the day from Apple was spectacular. As much as the stock market's through the roof, most of the businesses that will be most negatively impacted don't trade on the stock market. They don't have stock. So there's a massive disconnect right now between Wall Street, the markets, and reality, what's happening to real businesses. And you could just walk down in downtown Guilford, downtown Madison, downtown Brantford, and you will see, stop and talk to any resident, any business owner down there. Traffic doesn't exist. People are not going into these stores, and there a lot of people are struggling. So it's going to be rough. And that's going to have an impact that then goes on to small business and goes an impact even further than that. So I would like to be able to analyze the political belief behind this. Like, what are they thinking? I know Trump doesn't want to give money to a lot of Democratic states and towns. The problem is a lot of those high density, highly populated areas happen to be Democratic, the inner cities. But I don't think that's even the issue. The issue is the Senate Republicans don't want to do anything. So that's if we have more on that pretty soon. I'm looking now to see if I'm set up to get a lot of updates on that, and I don't see anything of significant consequence coming in. So that being said, let's move on to Parkside. So to those that know the issue, I know we have some people that aren't in Brantford. If you're not from Brantford, this may not be something that is of interest to you today. I understand that. It is an affordable housing thing. It is an issue, I think, a precedent that sets us as just spectacular for so many other issues going forward. And I think that'll be one of the arguing points of the town as they go forward of this is just outrageous. The Parkside issue is the affordable housing facility in Indian Neck. And right now it's 50 units. It's 3 or 4 smaller buildings, 2-story buildings. It was originally built about 40 years ago for seniors only. But over time, it became seniors and basically special needs, people of extremely low income, mental disability, whatever it is, that became that type of facility. And Beacon, which is a large corporation from Massachusetts, makes their money on this. Their CEO is the former person who handled affordable housing in the state. So that's a strategic hiring by Beacon. And because the affordable housing laws are set up that are fairly generous to corporations that put up affordable housing, it became a very profitable venture. And Beacon has made a lot of money using taxpayer dollars and tax credits, building units, owning those units for forever, and making money on those units while the construction cost is largely borne by taxpayers under this guise of affordable housing. And they are required afterwards to file annual filings that say it's affordable housing, but let's not pretend for a second it's not really, really big business. They are, I believe, in excess of $100 million company, and they certainly have that in assets. So they came forward multiple times. They changed their plan multiple times. They have yet to be able to design a project that fits solely on their property. The fire marshal, now he's retired, but the former fire marshal stated many times that there needed to be two entry and access points to this facility. They tried to do that through a Melrose Avenue access, which is a new road that would go in. The town, the RTM, rejected that. It is required that if town property has an easement on it, a deed restriction, or any change, that it goes through the legislative body. The owners of this property was the town. So while the developers, Beacon, won an appeal of the first decision, they were not able to get town approval to put an access road on Melrose. So they came back again with another proposal, which is the Siney Road access as their secondary access to satisfy the needs of the fire marshal. But in order to do that, make that happen, some of that is actually on town property. Yet they went ahead and drew that and wanted to count that as their access point. And planning and zoning said, okay, we'll let you do that, but if you're going to account for someone else's property in your project, we want you to go get permission from those people, and we want you to get some assurance that that access will always be there. And you do that with a deed restriction. What it means is no matter who owns the deed to that property down the road, there's an understanding that that property always has to be used for that access. That doesn't seem unreasonable. If this was your neighbor and they needed access to a barn to put up in the backyard, they would have to go to you first to say, listen, I want to make sure I can have access to this property. They would also have to ensure, for safety purposes, that that access would always be there, that you wouldn't expand your house to be larger and take over that access or deny access in any way, shape, or form, that if anybody purchased the property in the future, they would have to make sure that access stayed there. This seemed relatively logical. All planning and zoning did was say, okay, you're fine with your plan, 3-2 vote, it passes. Just get the approval of the property owners on property you don't own. That's all they did. Seemed pretty simple. The judge did not see it that way. And what is amazing is the amount of things in this decision that are false, and two, the reasoning and the logic in this decision. So there's a couple things. I'm going to open this up now, and I'm going to go through some of this. And I don't, it's hard to even put into words. She used a decision, Avalon Bay Communities versus Zoning Commission. It says the standard to be applied by the court is well settled, and in quotes, the record must establish more than a mere possibility of harm to a substantial public interest. So let's explain this. In order for planning and zoning to deny an application, they have to show the application would be harmful for the health and safety of residents of the town or what have you. This is not a standard necessarily for a stipulation that was added, that was basically go get the permission of your neighbors. That standard that she's quoting here is about approval or denial. That's one issue. But the record must contain evidence as to a quantifiable probability that a specific harm will result if the application is granted. Mere concerns alone do not amount to sufficient evidence to support denial of an affordable housing application. So here's the problem with this decision. Everyone agreed that there has to be two access points. The applicants agreed that there had to be 2 access points. In her decision, his decision, the judge states it's understood there has to be 2 access points. The project was approved with the understanding there would be 2 access points. But without having the approval of the other people who control that access point, how do you guarantee there will be 2 access points? How do you guarantee that person is not going to expand their property or sell their property? And part of the logic that was used in this is spectacular, and that is, I'm going to try to pull this up if I can. If not, I'll just talk about it. The Commission's resolution from which the plaintiff's appeal does not reference any evidence as to a quantifiable probability that the town will abandon signy fields or build structures that would impede access to the fields. Hold on a second. The evidence as to quantifiable probability was on approval or denial. It was approved. So this standard is questionable if it applies anyway. But then we get to the town will abandon signy fields or build structures that would impede access to the fields. The court found none in thorough search of the record. Okay, hold on a second. There was a proposal to put a road on Melrose Avenue. Melrose Avenue is the road that leads to Foot Park. They wanted to the left of that, after Indian Neck School, put a road that connected to the back of Sliny Fields, and therefore with emergency access for Parkside. One of the reasons the RTM said no was because that property would become devalued. If the town, at any point down the road, wanted to sell that property or redesign that property or repurpose that property, you would now have a road through the middle of it. Take any property and put a road through the middle of it, and it will devalue your property. So the very fact that they were considering that road shows there might be something in the future that would not use Sliny. But there's other things as well. The town has looked at its town buildings and potential repurposing and selling of properties in the past. Indian Neck School, based on its age, may be something that has changed in the future. So putting that road in could impact the sale value of Indian Neck School or what can happen on that property. We have also looked at putting ball fields, and this is years back, potentially on the Tabor property. So in many cases, we have looked at potentially selling that property, repurposing that property, taking fields at Sliny Fields, putting them elsewhere, and not needing that Sliny Road access. So I don't know what this judge read or how he was misled. But to say to a town, I don't see anything in your record that even discusses potentially moving anything there, when it's been discussed many times, is horrifically ignorant. But that's not even the main point. The main point overall is this. How do you tell a neighbor, another property owner, that you were forced to have your property used in a neighbor's calculation without your permission? All because they don't think you might sell it anytime soon. What is the logic of that? And what are the potential outcomes of that? So let's take a look at the land trust, for example. Let's suppose we want to build a Costco on property that is adjacent to the land trust. And to anyone who remembers the Costco application, a large part of that discussion was on what percentage of impervious property can be used, on what can be paved, what can't be, that sort of thing. So what now prevents somebody from saying, well, wait a minute, the land trust owns acres next to us. The land trust is not likely to develop that property. So why can't we use 3 or 4 acres of land trust property to calculate our impervious coverage without their permission? What's to prevent somebody now from saying, I want to put a development on my property. My neighbor, your house, has a driveway. It's not likely to ever change. So can we count that as access to our property? What does it do to property rights when a judge says it's okay for Beacon, a giant corporation, to come in, design a building that doesn't accurately fit on their property, design access roads that does not fit entirely on their own property, impedes on other people's property, yet they have a right to do that. The other people can't say anything. This is an absurd decision. It's nuts. Now, I'm sure the town will appeal immediately, and I've already gotten indications that they very likely will, but it is hard to put into words how nuts this decision is and what the impacts of that will be. How will every property owner not be up in arms over this? How will every developer not be up in arms over this? How will the land trust not be up in arms over this? Especially places and organizations like the land trust, who it's not likely they're going to develop, right? They want to keep open space. So what's now to prevent a developer? Let's just suppose, for argument's sake, Beacon comes in on acres next to a land trust and wants to put up affordable housing. And they're at 5% over the impervious coverage they can be at. Why could they not say, well, let's say 30G, it's for affordable housing. I can count acres on land trust property because it's not likely they're ever going to develop it or sell it. What's to prevent that? And how in the world does a judge, this is a new judge, relatively new, I think appointed just a few years ago, appointed by Malloy, and I think is new to the housing court because Berger was the previous judge. He's gone. This is a new judge. The decision makes no sense. It's also some things, and I'll read in here, that are spectacularly false. So when Beacon came to town, before they even applied for affordable housing, their first application was not affordable housing. That's the big missed point here. They weren't trying to build affordable housing. They went to affordable housing because their project was ridiculous to begin with. Their project was you had a 2-story buildings, multiple smaller buildings. They want to build 1-story, 4.5 stories high with 67 units. I think 6 or 7 are market rate. So 60 will be affordable housing. Now remember something about affordable housing. Affordable housing, there's different tiers. There's people that make 20% of the median income, 50% of the median income, 80% of the median income. So that means if we have the median income being $70,000, for example, in Brantford, if you make 80% of that, you can get housing there. We're not talking about poor. We're not talking about, a bunch of inner city people running to this area because it's free housing. It's not free housing. It just has to be priced and maintain that price for a while. In Brantford, we have a lot of housing that's already at that number. We just can't count it because it's deed restricted. So Beacon will get what they applied for, I believe, $23 million in tax credits to make this happen. They were denied last time. They very well might be denied again because it's a ridiculous number. But once you take away the market rate numbers from the 67 units, you're down to about 60, 61, $23 million for 60 units. We're talking almost $400,000 a unit. Anybody who's from Brantford know you can go to 1 million condos and buy condos for under $150,000, $160,000. If we instead just put people who needed housing up for that $23 million, we can house 120, 130 people or families. So the issue with the affordable housing law is clear. It's a massive waste of money. It's a massive money grab for companies like Beacon. It's not actually helping people. Actually, the idea I heard on Friday from a town official was, what if we had a voucher system where instead of giving $23 million to this group, we actually paid the rent of people that applied, showed their income level, and got them into condos, got them into other apartments that already exist. And that way they are not capped. Now, if you're at making $55,000 a year and you don't want to make more because you don't want to lose your apartment rate, if you're vouchered by a certain percentage, you're still incentivized to make more money and get off those vouchers. Currently, you don't have that incentive. Many people who are there never leave. They're always there. Quite frankly, they die there. So that being the case, so we have an issue with the law itself, and there's no question. The law is nuts. But Ray, 75 to start, that's the income? That's the 80%. What is the median income in Brantford? Let me know the answer to that. Median income, Brantford, Connecticut. 69,510. So if we take, that's income for a family. So median income in town was 58,009. So 80% of that we can take away $5,800. We can say that's 10%, double that. So basically $47,000. If you make under that, you can get housing here for about 10 or 15 units, and then whatever. The housing, how the affordable housing numbers are calculated is 80% of the median income, so with $47,000, your housing costs cannot be more than a third of that, or I believe 30% of that. We're talking about $15,000 a year on housing costs. But your rent would be $1,100 or $1,200 plus electric, things of that nature. You have to fall into that number. But if we go back to this decision for a second, and I'm kind of blown away by this, but if we go back to this decision, here's just some of the statements that are absurd. Return, blah, 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 blah. The site was underway. There's a sentence in here that says the town was part of the process of looking at other. I want to read it directly from this, so give me 1 second. Funding at the applicants. Therefore, the applicants, in cooperation with the town, conducted a search for a location for the development. That never happened. The town was never involved in any search for development. The search concluded that the existing 5-acre site on South Montaouise was the most suitable. Bullshit. There was no search. The applicants put a list of, I believe, 13 properties on. We found out later, never called most of the property owners. Never even considered it. The only thing they looked at was the Branford Hill School property. And the RTM said no, and that was to make it a park. And by the way, I think they said no. It was Democrats, Republicans, everybody said no to that. So if we get into this political bullshit where the Democrats are telling you, oh my God, we got to be for this, give me a break. Because you fought against it when it was in your property, in your neighborhood. So give me a break on that. It's nonsense. But at the end of the day, the town was not involved in looking at locations. The town at no point decided that was the best location for it. In fact, information provided primarily by the applicants, Jay Pottinger, the attorney with Yale, who's representing the Housing Authority, provided documentation that said the best place for affordable housing was on transportation lines and with sidewalks and near grocery stores. None of this place is near any of those things. So no one in their right mind would ever have concluded this is the best place for this. In fact, Fred Russo, I think, at the meeting said, listen, this was a mistake 40 years ago. Why are we just making a mistake worse? So there are things written in this decision that are false, that never happened. I don't know what this judge did. I mean, she's talking about an exhaustive review of the record. She has missed huge conversations about changing signing access, maybe moving fields elsewhere. Completely false information about the town's involvement in this process. And then she set a standard by which an applicant can come in and use property they do not own as part of their calculations. If Parkside had come in and Beacon had come in and designed their 2 access points on their property, this wouldn't be a thing. It would have been approved. Instead, they couldn't fit it on their property. And if you can't fit a development on the property you own, make the development smaller. But Beacon needed to make a profit. So the profit margins for Beacon, a Boston development company, is what influences how we treat private property rights in Branford, according to this judge. That's absurd. That's nuts. Give me one Democrat who's going to look it up and say we should fight for this, when it's basically a massive money and land grab by a Boston-based developer. That's what it is. This affordable housing law is a joke. It will never get changed because the people in the inner city, the representatives in the inner city, will never change it. So even if representatives from Branford or Guilford or Madison wanted to change it, it will never change because the people who have been in office longest, those inner city Democrats, won't change it. You'll never get them on board. And you don't even want to bring it up because if you want something down the road, you're not going to get it. It's a comically absurd law, and this decision is absurd. The appeal is almost certainly forthcoming. The idea I heard last week makes a lot of sense. Should we do a system where we can use vouchers? If the state is going to put up, and I don't know if they will, they come from the federal government, the state manages them, but if they're going to approve $20-something million in tax credits, by the way, those are dollar for dollar tax credits. So what happens is large corporations apply and say, Instead of paying 10 million in taxes, give us 10 million in tax credits, and we will fund these other projects. What I would say is, no, just pay your taxes, and then we'll write vouchers for people that need it. If we have a family of 4 and they need a 2 or 3 bedroom condo, we can give them a voucher to use current existing stock and pay their rent, as opposed to building a structure that will cost $23 million and last 30 or 40 years. It doesn't make any sense, as Beacon starts siphoning off profits the rest of their life. That's their business model. And they've fallen under this, oh, it's good for people because we're affordable housing nonsense. It's garbage. No one yet has been able to make an argument why this law makes sense. It sounds good. It sounds humanitarian. It's not. Look at it this way. If you had $100 and you can buy people lunch, homeless people lunch, you can either spend $10 a person and go to a local deli, make a deal, feed 10 people. Or you can say, you know what? I want to take you to a much nicer restaurant and spend $25 a person and feed 4 people. Which one is more humanitarian? Feed more people. Maximize the use of that money. $23 million for 60 units is not maximizing the use of taxpayer dollars. It's a waste. If you can take that money and house 120 people in larger facilities, in existing facilities, that makes sense. No one's saying don't spend the money. No one's saying don't help the people. We're saying do so with some sense of decency and value. Get the most for your money. Normally, that's our precedent. You ever go to the food pantry or you go to the community dining room, they're taking small amounts of money and stretching it to feed as many people as possible, yet the state is throwing $20-something million to put 60 units so Beacon can make profit the rest of their lives. It's nuts. This decision sets a massively ridiculous precedent. It sets property rights back for years. So that's all I really wanted to talk about today. We weren't going to come on live because it was a holiday, but this was just a little crazy, and a lot of people had asked questions about it. The decision's awful. If I were running for office, I would have a letter ready to Ned Lamont and a letter ready to Rosa DeLauro, to our state reps. Do not fund this. Find better uses for this money. Help more people than will be helped with this project. Don't let a large corporation come in with their money. They can hire Hollister, the most expensive housing lawyer there is in the state. They can fight through all this stuff. Don't let them bully the town. You want to give us $23 million? We could do a lot with $23 million. We could find some property and build affordable housing for $23 million. Or we can give vouchers to people that need it, fill the existing condo units. Those condos will love that. Guaranteed money. As this law is written, it's terrible, and this decision makes it 10 times worse. Put pressure on your elected officials to make sure this project never gets funded. Also, I think the town's going to appeal it too, so there's that way as well. Don't fall for the feel-good crap. We're all for feel-good stuff. We're all for helping people that need help. If someone's elderly and isn't working and has no money, they should have a place to stay. They should have a roof over their head. We all agree on that. But at this price, when you can help far more people for that amount of money, and you can do so without impeding other people's property, we have to look at that instead. Okay, we will be back tomorrow, and we'll talk more about the process of a new judge that's happening. I watched much of those hearings today, more on the stimulus, and if there's anything local to talk about, send us a question, email, what have you. Hope you enjoyed today, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Good night, guys.